Okay.
Hey there. We're live in Lawrence, Kansas from all of our different homes and virtual backgrounds. It's 8 o'clock, and my name is Brad Allen. I'm the director of Lawrence Public Library, and I'm here with our Mayor Jennifer Ananda and our guests. We can see Tom and Brian, and we see Michelle there. Welcome, welcome. We are recording this, and we'll have it online. Think I don't know if we're posting on Facebook and YouTube, so you can check it out there in our archive. This is just an idea that Kristen and I had. We thought that it might be fun to just have some folks on and have a very casual conversation just about the life that we're living in right now, and just kind of a personal opportunity to get to know some people here in town or people town adjacent. So really no agenda here other than just a nice conversation. And as Jennifer and I were talking about earlier, yes, the question can go both ways. You can ask me a question. There's no holds barred here. So anyway, thank you all for joining us on this experiment. And I don't know, haven't really done this before, but I wrote out some questions as Jennifer, you and I know each other relatively well, but in a certain way, we know each other kind of as acquaintances and working on things, in government or whatnot. So I don't really know a whole lot about you. So one of the nice things about interviewing people I've found is that you get to find out a lot about them, and you get an opportunity to just ask people questions kind of on behalf of everyone else. So that kind of in mind, I was just curious to get to know a little bit more about your background, where you're from, how you ended up in Lawrence, all that stuff. Take us back a few years. Whoa.
Going back in time. Well, I think you just asked all your questions at once.
That's right. Where are you from? You're not from Lawrence originally, right?
No, I'm from Southeast Kansas, actual Southeast Kansas. Some people say cities that like Iola or Chanute or Southeast Kansas. We're from like legit Southeast Kansas. Girard. Y'all might know them from the Chicken Wars, Chicken Annies and Chicken Marys. I think that is about our only claim to fame. A while ago, we had a better claim to fame, which was that we were the socialist hotspot of the United States. We had a printer called Haldeman Julius there. Little blue books were very popular.
That's right.
And they printed also, I guess, a magazine called Appeal to Reason, which was a socialist, essentially, newspaper for folks. And we had a socialist presidential candidate announced his candidacy in Girard, Kansas. I think that's about all we got. Big Brutus is near us, but we can't claim it. But it's also very near Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Right. So I didn't know that. I thought that the Chicken Wars were in Pittsburgh, but in fact, they're not. They're in Girard. I didn't know that.
There's one on the city limits of Girard. There's one on the city limits of Pittsburgh, and then one on the other side of Pittsburgh.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. No, it is true. I think I don't know how much, I know just what you said is about the extent that I know of that publisher and all the really radical things that went on in Southeast Kansas. I don't know how many people really know that. I guess quite a few Kansans do, but it's pretty impressive and quite a claim to fame. It was a really big deal. Do you know a lot about that history? Is it kind of tied into the populists as well, or any of that? Do you know? I don't really know it all that well.
That's about the extent to which I can competently speak of that history. It's, I think that community it's very Italian. I grew up around Frigeries and Mingarellis, and there's a lot of Catholicism. So we have that connection to Frontenac, probably not the direct mafia connections. But I don't know how that ties in. There was a lot of strip mining that happened down there. And so a lot of those families are still there. So I grew up with a sufficient amount of guilt. So I try not to put myself in a position of saying stuff I don't know about, because it will keep me awake all night.
Well, there are so many people that are being videoed on TV or otherwise that say plenty of things that they don't know what they're talking about. So that's fair game these days, I think. You can just kind of say whatever you want.
I made a very conscious choice not to be that kind of
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. Less fact checking that we have to do. So that's good. That's good. I just started reading. I got an advanced reader of that new Thomas Frank book, and it's kind of the beginning of it. Kind of starts with the populists kind of deciding to create the party, like driving on a train from Kansas City to Topeka. And I think a lot of it, I just have read the introduction of it, but a lot of the populist and socialist movement that comes out of Kansas and a lot of these areas. It's
Mhm.
really interesting. Well, from that, what led you to Lawrence? How did you end up here? How long have you been here?
I've been here for 20 years now. When I was a senior in high school, it wasn't really a question of whether or not I was going to go to college, which I think that maybe should have been, but it wasn't. I was just a foregone conclusion to me. And I applied to two universities. I applied to Baker University in Baldwin City and Hawaii Pacific University in Kaneohe, Hawaii. And I was accepted to both. But very small town kid. I graduated with 99 other students. And Gerard, I think, was probably at that time 3,500, maybe. And so I kind of got a little freaked out about going to Hawaii. I was going to study marine biology and theater. Um, and I ended up going to Baker University where I majored in biology and theater. But that only lasted a year. I love Baldwin City. It's a very sweet town. When I moved there that year, they got a Pizza Hut, and that was the big news of the year. And so I spent a lot of time in Lawrence, and my second year of college, I transferred to KU, as one does, and haven't left since. So yeah, it's been 20 years. And I finally graduated after 4.5 years with a double major in film and English creative writing.
No, I think that is an interesting, being from Topeka and having Washburn there. There was kind of that is similar, I think, to Baker in that when the people who are kind of hesitant to go to like a bigger school, maybe start at a smaller school, that it feels kind of more at home, and then maybe move from there. I just remember that with some of my Topeka friends or people from smaller towns, that it had kind of a different feel than a really big university. So I could totally understand that.
Yes.
I haven't been to Baldwin nearly enough. Just mainly, it's been a while. Mainly is the what was the festival? The
Maple Leaf
Maple Leaf Festival.
Festival.
I've been to that. I rode on the train.
The
Um,
train's fun. Yeah, you have
got
a
it.
little one, so you probably
Yeah.
did Thomas.
Well, oh, I went there in college. That's the last time that I've been to the Maple Leaf Festival. Don't tell anybody. It's been a little while. So no, we haven't been down there with Zadie. So we'll have to do that sometime. Remember, I
This
bought
is
a.
totally safe from right here. It's not
Yeah,
going anywhere.
yeah, it's very true. Well, yeah, that's. I'm just always interested in how people kind of make their way to a college town, and then people leave or they stay, or the reasons that keep us in a town like this. What kept you in Lawrence? What was the allure that made you stay?
Um, growing up, I was always called things like a feminazi. And worse. And I don't know what this is rated, so I won't go into those. But I just never kind of fit where I was. I was often called creative, interesting, which is very Kansas nice. Um, and when I found Lawrence, the day that I moved here, after we found an apartment, I moved here with my high school boyfriend. Um, we, I had a job interview at the Merc, and this was when I was down on Mississippi Street. And
Right.
I went in for my job interview, and I got a job at the Merc right when I got here. And I don't think I could have had a better outcome than having worked at the Merc through those kind of formative, really, I was very, very naive, very dumb, very opinionated, very judgmental. And the people who were there, people like Nancy O'Connor, um, all of these people who've been there for seemingly hundreds of years. And there's still some of them there who were there when I started. They were so gracious with me and provided an outlet for that kind of immaturity that I carried with me, but also, this inspiration to continue to grow and become a better person over time. I don't think that there is anywhere else I can think of having been that would have so graciously carried me into adulthood. So that was the heart of why I stuck around here. I'm still friends with a lot of the people from there. I served on the Merck board. I want to give back as much to the Merck as it has given to me, and I'm not paid to say that. But I'm really thankful. It is probably the reason that I stayed in Lawrence for those first few years.
Oh, that's great. No, that's really beautiful. That is kind of a quintessential and of college town thing. I mean, like I'm from Kansas. This is the college town that I went to. Like others I've traveled to that have that, and especially like it seems like it is like a local co-op or a local restaurant or things like that that just kind of create this sense of a community that makes that place very kind of uniquely that place. I remember when I moved to uh, Champaign or Madison or places like that. There are those similar kinds of institutions
Yeah,
that just build the character of a place. That's really cool.
it's
That's
cool.
and that was a special little place too. I remember going there and buying like a bag of groceries that was that big and it was like $40. I was like, I can't afford as a college student to go here as I don't know how to buy bulk food. I just buy very expensive organic stuff in boxes. So
Oh yeah,
but yeah, it was but yeah, I remember it. It was just such a special place and has just continued to grow. Yeah, that's really neat.
it is.
Um,
I will say, reminiscing about the Merc is dangerous when you don't have a member number that's only 2 digits long, and you still call it a member number, or if you don't remember at least like 3 locations that it's been and having been there. But it is that very special place, and frankly, I worked there as an undergrad, and it was around the time that they were starting to implement the living wage for staff. But I think that I survived on shrink produce, shrink dairy, shrink bulk. Like I got, I had never, I didn't, I, this is ridiculous, but I didn't know what an avocado was before I moved to Lawrence, just because I didn't have that exposure.
I'm
And
most
so,
certain that I did not either.
thank you. We are naive together. So,
That's right.
when you were gone from Lawrence for a while, tell me about your timeline with Lawrence.
It's Lawrence. I graduated from high school in the early '90s, and then was at KU for 4 years, from '93 to '97, and then I graduated, and left. And so I hadn't, I was gone for 15 years. I lived in Topeka for a little while, lived in other places, but yeah, I was just there for the 4 years, and then I was in this band, and we were like, "I've graduated. We can finally go on tour." And that lasted for all of 4 months, and the band broke up, and we all hated each other. And I moved into my parents' basement and built tires at the Goodyear factory to make money to go to library school. And then I moved to Champaign, and that was kind of the beginning of my wanderings here and there. So yeah, I was gone for a good bit, and
Yeah.
it's been fun to come back because it is just I don't know, it's a place that it has, I guess when you spend your formative years somewhere, it makes an impression on you, and it's always been a special place to me too. But yeah, it's here and there for a while. So
So what was the name of your band?
it was a band called Vitreous Humor.
Oh, I've heard of them. Yeah.
They were, yeah, we had that band and we had another little band for a little bit. But yeah, I was on scholarship, so I would not quit school to be in a band. I thought that was colossally the worst idea that you could have. So, my wife always says I was born as a 40-year-old, so I'm finally past that age now, a little bit, but, so I just didn't want to leave, but so we did that for a little while, but, oh yeah, Brian's asking. Our singer did just play songs from an EP that we recorded in college for. I think it's the first time in 25 years that he's played some of those songs. It was really
Wow.
amazing to see in his little on his acoustic guitar in his little studio apartment where he lives. He did that last night on Facebook. It was pretty neat. It was neat to see. I haven't seen him play that stuff in forever. So that was a fun little flashback. Yeah.
I had no clue you were such a part of a little Lawrence institution.
For just a little hot minute, just a little bit. Yeah. So, and then left, and you know, I don't know. I think I'd never lived anywhere besides Kansas, and so I was really intrigued to move somewhere else. And I decided I wanted to go to library school, and was kind of a snob about not wanting to go to Emporia State for some reason. I just wanted, and that was my opportunity to leave the state. So that's how I ended up in Illinois and other environs. So,
Interesting.
but this is the longest I've been anywhere since I left my parents' house, is moving back to Lawrence in 2012. So it's crazy. I've been here almost
Proud of
8 years.
you.
Almost 8 years. It's nuts.
That's great. Um, how interesting that you are. I'm sorry, that's just sinking in. One, how not cool I am. And two, how cool you are.
No, I don't like to talk about that stuff much. I don't, I don't know. It was from a long time ago, and it was, but I don't know. It was what it was.
Well, you said you were born as a 40-year-old. I am turning 40 this year, So if you have any tips, I would love
I'll
to
let you know. Yeah.
hear.
Save those pennies, save your money, be scrupulous.
Thanks. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, no, it's like I'm devolving as my years go along, I think, actually. So, but
You're entitled.
yeah, I guess so. Erin, my wife, is like, why didn't you burn through all of that when you were, in your 20s, like you were supposed to? But what can you do? I don't know. Well, I was curious. I also, you worked at Lawrence Public Library also. Was that in that time, or was that after? Was that while you were in college? Was that after college?
Both. So I worked at the library as an undergrad, and I worked in the library that's featured behind you there, in the old library where you had to thunk the books, and load the carts and sort them our darn selves. So back when we had to do real work at the library.
Backbreaking work. Backbreaking work.
I was
in a
very
new modern
young.
era.
Yeah. I always hated shelving the children's carts.
I still hate shoving children's carts. Yeah.
They're sticky. And there are so many because they're so small.
Yes.
And having kids now, I still don't think I would enjoy that. I haven't gained
No.
any positive perspective on that.
There, you're having flashbacks. There's the old
Yeah.
children's area. Yeah, there's the books.
So here's an example of my misspent youth during college, though. I think it was a Saturday. I was scheduled to work very early. And I had friends in bands, as one does when they're undergrads. And I think I had gone to a show the night before. And I don't think I made it home that night. I didn't get up to anything too nefarious in college. I got most of that out of my blood in high school, which may or may not be a better thing. I don't know. That's highly subjective. But I came in, and I'm so embarrassed by this, and I can't believe I'm saying it right now. But I was wearing fishnet hose and a lace French connection skirt that I had, and like a tank top with probably a blazer, because that's a thing. Maybe even this blazer, I've had it for a very long time. And one of the managers, the next time that I worked, because I was shelving in the children's section, I was also wearing heels. And they were like, we just want to remind you that we wear professional business casual clothing when we're working. And I was so embarrassed. But I didn't care then. It's in hindsight that I'm embarrassed. But that was kind of a pretty good example of when I worked there when I was very young. And then I worked there in law school as well. That was also the old library. That's how long ago this was. And I was the head night circulation clerk. So I'm glad that I gained a little bit of maturity to be entrusted with such important work the second time around. But I gotta say, that thunk of the books was like one of the most satisfying, like tactile experiences that I've ever had. I don't know why I appreciated that so much. I was so sad to see that it was gone.
Yeah, those old 3M machines. Yeah, it's like, yeah, we had those in Topeka. It must be the electromagnetic turning on and off or something. I don't really know. Yeah, it's that old electromagnetic technology, but I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's a sound and yeah. I mean, it's something very visceral and physical is going on inside that thing too. I don't know. I have to open one up and see what they do, but I know what you're talking about. The
Might
thunk.
not be best to open that.
Probably not. You have to wear a hazmat suit.
But books have always been my escape. So I think that working at the library was couldn't have been better. You know, you get to, when you're working in the circulation room in particular, you get to meet all the new books before everybody else. You get to, you know, check things in and score them before anybody else can take them. And you get to see things that you would never imagine seeing before. So I was so thankful to get that kind of access to that, because, you know, otherwise undergrads going to the library, unless they're getting paid, probably not happening a whole lot. Um, I don't know. I really appreciated that. And then, you know, when I got elected and I said that I checked out the book, I'm getting elected, that became a thing. That reading a book became this very exciting new thing that people hadn't heard of in a while.
Yes. No, I just saw on I think it was on John Oliver. It was like he does, and now this, and it was all these things on Inside Edition, and the very last little part was books. Remember those? Yeah. So I don't know. Uh, yeah, you're right though. It's I mean, I had no idea until I worked in libraries just the tremendous diversity and vastness of how many books there are and how many are so shockingly interesting. Like it's like exciting and depressing all at the same time. If you have anxiety, you're like, how am I going to read all of this stuff? It can be too much almost if you're a curious person seeing all those books coming in. So I know I had that similar experience. It's pretty eye opening to just see the vastness of all of it. It's very true.
The
Well,
most
and oh, go ahead.
Okay, the most exciting thing about the end of a semester though was like getting to go in and like just getting a fat stack of books that, like, you know, you're gonna read maybe 10 at
Right.
most, but you got those 50 books and it's like anything that looks interesting. It was like gorging on books. Delicious.
No, it's true. I I guess when I'm kind of a retail therapy type person, I guess. And so I would just buy things that, and then not care that I bought it very quickly. And so when I was in Topeka, I started going to the library, just checking out books just to get the thrill of acquiring things. And you just bring it back. Like it worked, it works. I was like, I'll take all this home. And then I'm like, man, why did I check all this out? I don't know, and return it. It works a lot better than having to return things to actual businesses. Yeah.
It's like actually finding the way to eat and not gain calories.
That's right.
Good job.
It worked for a little bit. It's a way to get that fix in. Just take them home and then bring them back. It works well. So, but I was going to ask you, as you just broached it briefly. I don't think I've really asked her in depth, or if I have, I've forgotten. Like, talk to me about your decision to run for city commission, and what inspired you to do that. Just curious to know a little bit more about that. It's a bold move to make. I think it's really hard. I think it's a big responsibility to be a city commissioner, and for the most part, having worked with city commissioners or for the past 8 years, it's pretty thankless. So I'm always fascinated. I'm always impressed when people step up and do something like that for our city. I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about your thoughts about that.
Would you be shocked to know that the roots are at the Merc? So on top of my dad, so he was a fire chief for more than 30 years in my hometown. So he worked for the city. Always had lots to say about it. They had a form of government where one of the commissioners was basically overseeing the department. So we don't have that in Lawrence, thank goodness. But he had lots of good advice for me, which was nice, and some okay advice. But when I worked at the Merck, Boog Heiberger was on the board. Mike Rundle worked there. I worked with Mike when he was the mayor. And then, oh, this is so embarrassing. I love her so much, and I just completely blew her name out of my brain. She's our representative.
Marcy Francis.
Marcy?
No, not Marcy, but Marcy was actually on the board as well. She's our senator. I'm talking about our representative whose name starts with an A. Oh my God, she was the president of the board just before I got on the board. And she's amazing. And now I'm a horrible person for not remembering her name. Anyway, so all of these amazing leaders in our community were either employees of the Merck or on the board of the Merck, and I got to see them and communicate with them and see that they were like normal humans who really care about things. I really love policy. I love picking things apart and putting them back together. I'm really good at taking the long view. The best compliment I ever got was to be called perspicacious, which means having ready insight into things. And that gave me so much joy. And so I decided to go to law school after college because I'm argumentative, I guess. I wanted to do policy. I wanted to change the world. I originally wanted to make documentaries and change the world, but they weren't hiring. So did the law school thing, and then also got my MSW because I care about people in addition to the law. And so I kind of have been telling myself for several years that that was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be the first female president of the United States of America, but that will happen soon.
You've got time. You got time. You just barely qualify to even be president at this point.
I was so excited to turn 35. It's the last big birthday you have. Let me tell you, I marked my calendar. But no, really though. I think that I have something to give, and I think we all have something to give our communities, and we should do what we have the best strengths in doing. But I also am not so egotistical that I walk into a room knowing that, or assuming that I know what I'm doing or that I'm good at it, even if I think I am. So I felt like City Commission was a good place to start. Having been business partners with Boog, he had a lot of really good insight, gave me a lot to think about when I was going into that decision. And I still wanted to after those conversations. And so there was this year when the deadline was coming up, and I was like, okay, everything I said needed to happen in order for me to do this has happened. If I don't do it now, I will forever have an excuse not to do this. So I did it. I was literally shaking when I turned in my paperwork. And you're absolutely right. It is a largely thankless job, but if we're doing it for the thanks, then we're probably doing it for the wrong reasons anyway. And if you go in assuming that you're not there to make difficult decisions that aren't going to make everybody happy ever, including yourself sometimes, sometimes it's the least worst decision that you have to make. I don't know. I feel like Eileen Horn. Yes. Kristen, thank you. I'm sorry, Eileen, because I love you so much. I apologize. Anyway, I forgot. My train just totally derailed having seen that. But yeah, I'm here now, and I'm hoping that I'm doing an okay job. And if I'm not, then I'll find out in a few years, won't I?
Well, I love that perspective, as I think that's what we need a lot of times, that we need more of in government, and I, as we talked earlier, I promise that I have no interest in really getting into politics or making this political, but what I would say is, what I have seen, what I've learned from being less of a, I don't want to use the wrong words, but, I'm less of an idealist than I used to be. And I realized that, I used to just talk shit about, people not making the right decision and not really realizing the massive complexity in the decision that has to be made. And it's really easy to sit on the sidelines and complain. about something not going your way and not seeing that it could be radically complex, and that there's, like you say, a lot of times you're ending up making the best worst decision or something like that, which is kind of heartbreaking, but I mean, it has to be done a lot of times. And I mean, I think, I know we need more folks that have that mindset that you do about going in and just trying to do the best you can for our community. I always, I did. Um, is it anything? I guess you said you've talked to quite a few people who had served on the city commission. Was it like you thought it would be? Is it different than you thought that it would be? Is it, I mean, have to certainly imagine what something would be like, and now you've lived it for a while. What are the differences kind of in your mind?
So did you read any parenting books before you had kids?
Not as many as I should have.
So you read some, and maybe you talked to some people who had kids as well about like raising them. That is exactly what it feels like. Like you can read all the books you want, you can have all the conversations that you want until you're actually doing it. There is no comprehension of the reality of that as prepared as I thought that I was. Um,
Yeah.
but I also, wasn't expecting to get elected after the primary. I 100% was ready to be fourth place and 0% ready to be second place. So that was a bit of a shock in and of itself. So, it's all been kind of a, whoa, oh, okay. A little bit of every step of the way. I mean, even becoming mayor. So, when I was practicing law, I was like, okay, 1 year in, I'll know what I'm doing. And about 1 year in, I was like, oh, in 5 years, I might know what I'm doing. And I kind of felt that way with city commission as well. And, then becoming mayor, and it's like, okay, well, I've closely studied what Lisa has done. And, I watched Stuart doing what he was doing. And, I've seen other people in action, and I got this. And then, you throw in the fact that we're changing the dates when we do that. And a lot of our boards and commissions expire December 31st. So that was something that nobody had dealt with. I got a brick through my window. That was something nobody had dealt with. Now we're all sequestered to our homes. So this is something that we've never had to deal with. And so, the second I think, Nancy O'Connor put it best. She told her sons, and she has 2 sons, so I very much parallel with her experience. The second you think you're cool, you're not. The second you think you know what you're doing, you don't.
Well, that's really, I think, a fantastic perspective, because I think, um, the world is always constantly uncertain, and like knowing that it's going to be uncertain and trying to figure out how you just sit in that space is really important. I mean, I think that's a difficult space to sit in, and a lot of people don't want to sit in it. But if you have the knowledge that that's how it's going to be, that's a step ahead of wanting to try to control things and make them and think that you can solve it in some way that's unsolvable. You know what I mean? I think those are wise words. And that's hubris, right? The minute that you think that you have everything figured out. I remember, like, I told a buddy of mine hit a deer, and when we were in college, I was like, God, man, you got to be more careful. Like, be careful. And how many days do you think it was until I hit a deer? I think it was 2 days until I hit a deer. Well, the deer hit me, but it's like, that's karma. Like, that's like thinking that you know things.
Yeah.
And so having that wisdom to know, to have some certain kind of certainty, but that know that everything is constantly evolving and changing. That's good stuff. That's wise, in my humble opinion. And you talked about it a little bit, I mean, and yeah, like this world is weird right now, and I guess maybe the answer might be a little bit different than I thought that it would, since you talked about wanting to be the first female president of the United States. Did you ever imagine yourself being the mayor of a city?
I don't know. I I didn't have a lot of space for imagination when I was very young. Like when I was in elementary school, we were very poor. I had a very rough I scored very well on the ACE test, as I am a good test taker. And so there wasn't a lot of room for imagining things like that. But one of the first memories that I have are two things. One was creating an environmentalist magazine with my cousins, and I was the editor. And like it was, it was very elementary school environmentalism, save the whales, don't use plastic, recycle, even though there probably wasn't a recycling facility within hundreds of miles of my home. And so we did that. We created that magazine. And then the second thing was there was this abandoned train station. There were train tracks right across the street from my house. And there was this abandoned train station, like foundation. And my sisters and I and some friends who would be left with us would go over there and like clean up. And the whole time I was really into the Babysitters Club. Reading was my escape. That's where I lived when I was younger, and I was very Christy in the Babysitters Club as much as I wanted to be Claudia. And so I would like sweep it, and I would be like, okay, so we can take care of kids for people who can't take their kids other places, and it would be like the Babysitters Club, and I didn't like children, so I don't know what I was thinking, but that was my business model, and I wanted to do these things to help other people, even though I wasn't in any kind of position to really be able to help myself or anybody else. And I think that I did have some hubris, and maybe that's why I'm able to empathize with I was an activist. I come from an activist root. It came from an egotistical place. So, I say that understanding that when I said that, it had very different meaning then than it does for me now. There's also a difficult relationship with power, I think, as well. It's like my perspective has always been power corrupts, absolutely. And now I'm in a position with power. And so how do I wield that responsibly? How do I wield power in a way that wouldn't make me feel good about someone being in power and having that power and using it and meaningfully? And so I wouldn't say at this point being the first female president is necessarily on my list of things to do. I'm sure that, granted, the bar's pretty low at this point. I don't know that I would necessarily make the grade, but I do want to do what I can to help in the most effective way that I possibly can.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. I don't know. I'm just always intrigued at how people end up the places that they end up, and how we find these trajectories, into government or into careers or into activism or things. It's just always fascinating, and sometimes the dream for whenever, and then sometimes just finding yourself in a space and making decisions, like I don't know. It's I'm just interested in those journeys. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
Um, I, like I said, I wrote down a bunch of questions here. Some are lighter than some of these. One thing I was just curious, because I've just seen from Facebook, seem to be quite a good knitter, crocheter, and sewer. You're sewing masks as our
yeah,
mayor, sewing free masks for people. How long have you been doing that? Is that
crafting.
huh?
I come from a crafty family. My mom sews. Every year she makes up a pattern completely from scratch for my kids for Christmas. So one year, all of her grandkids, she has 5 now. She bought a bunch of baseball hats and then proceeded to completely design from scratch a parrot that has tail feathers coming out the back of this hat, and then it comes up over the top and then has a big parrot beak on the front with no pattern whatsoever. And she put these together on these baseball hats for all of her grandchildren. So they're amazing, and every year they're amazing. And so there's her. My youngest sister whittled and put together a chess set for my kids. And then my middle sister actually has a gig sewing children's clothing and selling it online. So knitting came pretty naturally to me, and crafting. It stems from being interested in art, but realizing that maybe I'm not an artist. But yeah, I love to knit. I will crochet, and I do sew, but knitting is where my heart lives. And you talked about retail therapy. Set me in a yarn shop, and I am not walking out in a healthy financial position.
Oh yeah, I know. It's, when Erin and I first met, she's knitted ever since I've known her, which is almost 20 years now, and like going in the yarn barn with her, like I didn't realize like nice yarn is crazy expensive. When we met, she was going to make me a sweater, and then somebody's like, the last thing you should ever do is make a boyfriend a sweater. Like that's just going to
Oh,
go nowhere good. And so we agreed that that wouldn't happen. She made me a scarf eventually with that, but she went to get this fabric, and so I remember thinking about the economics of it. I was like, how does one produce a sweater that costs less than $500? You know what
oh
I
no.
mean? Like
Nope.
it's it's amazing. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe it. You have to use really inexpensive fabric or have some kind of mass-produced machinery to the amount of time she would spend. It's unreal. It's a labor of love. It's pretty amazing.
That's, and nobody appreciates knitted gifts as much as they should. So for the last few years, I've just been knitting for myself because I know I appreciate it. Every year I knit something for the kids' teachers, which is nice. And I actually started a sweater for my ex-husband about 5 years ago. It still sits unfinished, but the marriage is done. So maybe I'll finish it sometime for myself because it is a very nice Celtic knot sweater from a Jane Austen Knits catalog. But yeah, they're beautiful projects, and there's this person out of, I think he's out of Denmark, who has kind of brought it into high fashion world. Um, it's a universe. It's a whole universe.
No, it's incredible. I watch it from afar, and Erin hasn't had nearly as much time to knit, but yeah, just watching the process, and she would buy all those Rowan catalogs, and look at, it's an amazing world, and just yeah, it's something. But yeah, I've seen you do some really nice stuff. I see it on Facebook. It's very beautiful, very beautiful. So that
It's
comes, I
nice to be
mean,
nice.
how does it I mean, does that go even deeper into your family than beyond that? Like I'm always just curious how, like, my family, you know doesn't do anything. Like you know what I mean, we have like nobody knits, nobody cooks, nobody does anything. Like that was not really part of our upbringing, so I don't really have any skills, or really any interest in them. I'm just always curious how these things work, like how somebody becomes crafty and why other people don't, and just whether that comes from our roots. I mean, does it go beyond, is your grandmother and other, I was like, is it go, how deep does this go into your family? It's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to see.
Yeah, on my mom's side of the family, we don't have a lot of that linkage in history. My mom's dad is Italian. Her last name was Russo when she was born, but she never met her father. And so we don't have a connection to that side of the family. We know they immigrated from Italy. Um,
Right.
my grandmother raised my mom and her four siblings, and they were very much make do. I think that I have a high A score, and they outdid me. My dad's side of the family were farmers and Scottish and firefighters. Like, I don't think that it came from that. I think it comes from a very make do
Yeah.
mentality. And when you grow up poor, particularly when you're a single mother, my mom supported me with Pizza Hut wages. She was maybe a shift manager, and so when you don't have much to have, crafting is a really nice way to connect without having to drop a lot of money, because we weren't buying fancy yarn.
Right.
It was the acrylic, or whatever that might be. Things like Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout for 10 years, and you learn a lot of ways to be crafty in that as well. So I don't know what it is. I wonder if it's nature and nurture.
Yeah, no, it's just fascinating. Some people, pick something up as just as a hobby, and then other things are passed along. It's just I'm always intrigued how people um find themselves on all these different paths, you know. So that's really neat. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, oh gosh, what else? Like, do you want to tell me, like, you mentioned, you know, your love of books and the Babysitter Club. What are you reading right now? I would not be a good librarian if I didn't ask you what you're reading
Yeah.
right now. I almost messed that up.
It's a very important question. Well, currently in my room, Nico, my 13-year-old, I now have a teenager as of April 6th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He's reading the Gunslinger series. I'm reading them to him. I read to my kids every night because there are some parts of the Gunslinger series that perhaps need a little editing for a 13-year-old. And so I'm rereading that ahead of him. We're on book 3 right now. Also up here is Creative Quest by Questlove, Edith Wharton, and the Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States of America, and the ever-present, this never leaves my room. I'm in my bedroom right now. Elizabeth Zimmerman's Knitter's Almanac. She is one of the wittiest, sassiest writers there are. If you haven't read it, even if you're not a knitter, there are so many zingers in here. I wish I could have just opened one. Yeah, none that would probably not have lingo. Now you are only human, and early in the shawl, those areas of plain knitting between the increases will begin to appear somewhat bland, and you will start thinking of embellishments. She's just very sassy. I love her. So that's always in my room. But that's a pretty good smattering. I have the Ibram Kendi books. My son has the one that's written for kids, and then I have,
Oh, cool.
yeah, I have Branded from the Start or Branded from the Beginning.
Yeah, Stand from the Beginning. That book is incredible. Incredible book.
Yeah, so I've read most of it, but then I decided that we wanted to do these two together, so we're working on that. I tried to, so the book that I've read more than any other that I've owned since high school is A Confederacy of Dunces. I love that book, but I haven't read it in ages, but I've read it more than any other book I own. And I tried to start reading it again right now, but given our federal situation, it was a little bit more depressing than it historically has been to read. So I put it back down.
Context can be everything, you know. I mean, that's very true. I've been having a really hard time concentrating just in general on reading. It's been difficult to just kind of lock in. But yeah, no, there are certain things that I've had that experience too. Or even just like, well, are there books that you've read multiple times that then finally is just you're not in that space anymore? I've had that with certain books, like the angst that I had, like who I am as a different person than that angst, and it it doesn't register the same way, or it doesn't have the same kind of resonance. I don't know how to explain that. Or certain kinds of senses of humor, you find yourself not, they don't appeal in the same way. Like, yeah, that's a bummer that that the world is making you not enjoy the Confederacy of Dunces stuff. That's too bad.
What's on your shelf right now?
That's a good question. I've been reading a lot of advanced readers. Like I got there's this really great site called Edelweiss for librarians where you can get digital copies to review, and I just went kind of crazy on there and requested a bunch of stuff. And so I read this book. I don't read a lot of fantasy, but I read this book. I think it comes out in October or something, I don't know, called Rings Shout by P. Jelly Clark, and it's this world where it's set like in the early 1920s, and it's this band of like African American women that live with this like Gullah, like spiritual woman, and they go out and they people who follow the Ku Klux Klan eventually turn into Ku Klux kind of zombie monsters, and that D.W. Griffith and the Birth of a Nation is this spell that's been cast over white people, and so they go and they kill them and like give them to this other woman who runs these science experiments to try to figure out like what is going on with these monsters. And it's really wild. It's a novella, but it's this
Wow.
really fascinating blend of like fantasy, adventure, and then really the person has really deep knowledge of just Black culture, Black history, and just this idea of how hate lives in people. It's a wild book, really short, like 180 pages or so, really quick read. So that was kind of outside of what I normally read. I started reading It, because I've never read that before.
That book is so messed up. I read that in middle school, and nobody should have let that happen.
No, I checked it out from the Topeka library when it came out, and I read the first little bit, and like when Pennywise kills that kid, like I shut the book and took it back to the library. Like it scared the ever-loving shit out of me. Like I'd never been that scared ever. I was like, I'm taking this back. I don't want to read this anymore. And I never have read it again. And so it's been sitting on my shelf staring at me. And so I've read like the first 60 pages. Now I got distracted. I don't know. I've been reading a bunch of different things. I went back and started rereading How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which is a fantastic book, especially for these times right now that we're living in. Oh goodness, what else?
Can I just tell you, you're in for a surprise at the end of it.
It? Yeah. No, I've realized that I need to read more Stephen King. Like I read that whole Finders Keepers series, which I really liked a lot. And so, yeah, no, I don't know if I'll finish it because I started it and then I got distracted by something else, but I picked it back up and got back into it again. So we shall see.
I would love to see. So I was so audacious as to at Stephen King on this on Twitter. He did not reply. But wouldn't it be amazing to have like a bunch of different authors write the Gunslinger series? So all of the attempts at getting to the tower prior to the last series from these different authors' perspectives, because anything could have happened in those previous attempts. Just saying. It's $1 million idea just sitting there. Neil Gaiman, right? Like let's get some really awesome authors writing these versions of these. Share your wealth, Stephen King. It could be really cool.
That would be a lot of fun. I've been thinking about that more and more, just kind of about different versions of the same story, right? Just like taking the same story and writing it again and again and again in a different style, or like I've been thinking about that listening to like multiple takes of a song or something like that, you kind of have to, especially with the same artist, I guess you have to take a special close attention to hear the differences. But then, I was just, we're the main thing that I'm doing right now is watching Moana, Coco, and now Frozen on endless repeat with our 2-year-old. And I was going to post it on Facebook, but I didn't. But I told myself that I would never let it go become an earworm. It happened. Like I was folding laundry and I was singing "Let It Go" 2 days ago. It happened. But my long-winded point there is like I was looking at some deleted scenes of Moana from before they had like shined it up or anything this morning, and just seeing how it was just storyboards and just people kind of narrating it very broadly, and it without having this polish, it drew me in so much less, I guess, or maybe it draws you in a different way, and it made me realize how artistry can be so hidden in what it's doing until you starkly don't see it, right? I mean, that's maybe why all these Christopher Guest shows, things are so great, is it shows this unvarnished, unpracticed thing, and you see it in this different thing. But it was really interesting. I was thinking about that, like, God, what if Moana was really just storyboarded and relatively poor voice acting? Like, it's the aesthetic, or just the way in which somebody tells the story. It's a great idea. Just constant retellings of the same thing, but with a different approach. It's a great idea. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
It's a perfect setup because this has happened on a loop for hundreds of years. You know, this is a journey, the quest that this person has gone on multiple times. So it's perfect. It's perfect. I would just love to see that. But I'm also a really big dork. 100% own that. I may or may not have read fan fiction in my life, and not the dirty kind, like the kind with an actual plot, because there are stories that I love so much that I just want to pull everything I can out of them. So it'd be like fanfic, but they would get paid for it, and I would get to read it.
I like it. You need to just keep adding them until he caves. So, you know, I've seen some chats coming out. We should just, we've been ignoring the chats.
Is Yarn Barn essential? Serious question. I do not believe they are any longer. I think that they are still doing their mail order, but I don't think they're doing curbside service anymore. There is a store in Kansas City called Yarn Social. They're relatively new, and they have the fancy stuff. And they will do virtual shopping with you with a video that they take around in their store. So if you're really needing a yarn fix and want to see actual yarn in the process, you can do that. Let's see. Was there anything else that we missed on our chat?
You know, it's a great question, Katie, about the thing that I will say that has been fast. I usually don't reread or rewatch a lot of things, and it has been a really fascinating. I have probably seen Moana 40 times now, and I've probably seen Coco 25 or 30 times, and I'm not tired of it necessarily yet. And the thing that's interesting is all the nuances that I didn't get because I know it frontwards and backwards now, and then you see this little piece or this, I'm terrible at picking up foreshadowing. Like I am a failure when it comes to English literature. It's just I'm not good at that. But seeing when Miguel says, I'm going to play this at the plaza if it kills me, and then he steals a guitar and plays it and he ends up in the land of the dead. I mean, just really tiny little touches like that they've embedded really brilliantly. But at the same time, like all of these, the other thing that's fascinating with all this Disney stuff is I'm not a huge Disney watcher, to be quite honest. I just, hadn't really ever watched much of that stuff. Maybe I did when I was younger. I don't remember it. Certainly something I'd never been much of a fan of. So it's been interesting to have a young daughter watching these things, and like they're all the same. Like it's the exact same story in all of these again and again and again. It's like stasis is fine. No, I gotta go see what is over here, and then it creates an adventure narrative. And it, and it's seeing, for me, it's like, it's okay to be a shoemaker. It's like I find that I'm not very adventurous. Like I would never do this shit that Moana does. Like the guitar, whatever, just like make the shoes. I get it. That's fine. Like Motunui is all we need. It's but anyway, it's like the trope is fascinating, and the way that they just build it again and again and again is kind of masterful to see.
So my kids haven't watched a whole lot of Disney, but I like that you're bringing in the like bold theme. They haven't watched a lot of Disney because we didn't let them watch much TV. We did when they were 2, and that was mostly A Nightmare Before Christmas, which I can tell you forwards and backwards. But they missed all of the ones that came out when they were old enough to be into Disney, and now they're like so over it. It's not cool, except Mandalorian, evidently. That's worth begging for. But I like that you like pull out the boldness. I've been accused of being bold lately. Like I've asked people out, and like the boldness has shocked them into saying yes, I think. And it's perceived as being bold, whereas for me it's just like I feel like there's a connection and I need to know because I'm not good with ambiguity. Ambiguity makes me insane. Or running for city commission or whatever. So I like that connection to boldness, and I certainly watching the Disney shows that I watched as a youth would have never tied those two things together, because there was this more intrinsic tie then to like, I won't love whoever you tell me to love. That wasn't boldness. It was like independence driven, um, but only to a certain extent. Like, I want to love who I want to love, who is this other person who you didn't pick for me. So that's kind of cool that those have gone in that direction at this point, or at least that's your interpretation of it. And that made me think of a question for you.
Yeah.
So I'm friends with a librarian, or all of them. Many of them still work there from when I worked there. But I was told by my friend Kate that there are like different things people read books for. So one is like character development, one is for plot, one is for like location or time. And you probably have a better idea of what all those are, but what is yours?
Oh, that's good. You're like, I'm staring at Katie Stover down here in the corner, the master of Reader's Advisory down here. That's that's a great question. You know, I don't I don't care about plot. I care about, sometimes I care about language. Like the way that something is written is really important to me. Like when I read Infinite Jest, like I felt like that David Foster Wallace wrote the book for me. Like I felt like he wrote exactly what I wanted to read at that moment. That's one that I've struggled to get back into. I tried to reread that and it didn't hit me the same way. But when I was like 23 years old, that book blew my mind, and it was if you just plugged something straight into my brain and written it for me. And so a lot of it is style, characters, kind of like I found like that Ring Shout book that I was talking about, like when they all start like fighting and shooting each other and stuff, like I don't care about the technical aspects um of that. Sometimes plot can be great, like with mysteries. Like I didn't used to read mysteries when I was younger. One of the best things that ever happened to me when I worked at LA Public Library is this one woman, Eve Scheinman, would come in. I guess I could say that now here, right? I'm guessing that I just violated somebody's privacy. I don't think Eve would mind, but she would come in, once a week with the New York Times bestsellers, and I'd put things on hold for her. Like her library card was like 4 numbers long, right? And so it's she would come in and put things on hold, and she would come in and put Michael Connelly books on hold. And I was like, really? Michael Connelly? Like, you read smart stuff, And she's like, you've never read Michael Connelly? And I was like, no, I don't read stuff like that. I'm a snob, I read literary fiction. She's like, you need to read that. Shame on you. You live in Los Angeles. And so, I got some Michael Connelly and started reading it. And that was kind of the beginning of me really, really enjoying hard-boiled stuff. And even if I didn't know, like, I don't care enough to know why. I'm never going to figure out a damn mystery ahead of time, so I just don't even try. I'm just like, whoa, crazy.
You're along for the ride.
It's just pointless, but for me. But no, I really got into that. But it's and so maybe it's not so much plot as it is action. I actually do kind of like plot, but like action bores me. Like, except in big, huge fight, like I'm trying to think, like I struggle. I think that's why maybe sometimes I struggle with fantasy and journey and all this. Although now I'm telling you that I like Moana so much, it's just completely an adventure story, right? But it's, I don't know, hand-to-hand combat. Just I kind of get bored by it. I can't explain that, and especially so in prose. Like I really struggle with that in prose.
You enjoy watching it, like Kill Bill. Was that a ballet of gore for you, or was it just boring?
That I guess I did like because it was so choreographed. Like the choreography of it was brilliant. I think for me, yeah, it mainly just comes in prose. It's hard for me to follow. Like I struggled with I struggle reading Lord of the Rings, because some of it's very, kind of a blow by blow thing. I know I shouldn't admit that I struggle reading Lord of the Rings, but I do. Like I struggle with fantasy. It's hard for me sometimes.
I didn't read it until I had kids. I read The Hobbit,
right,
and
exactly.
then I read the first Lord of the Rings book, and I was like, wait, where's Bilbo? Nope, I'm out. So I get that.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, I don't know. It's got something to do with language, and I do like setting. Like I love setting. I love reading things set in LA. Like having lived, I just love Los Angeles, and so I love reading setting is important to me too.
Okay.
Good questions though. I'm hard to pin down. My mom's like, "You like books?" As I'm kind of all over the place. I'm difficult for people to get figured out when it comes to like a reader's advisory thing for me. Like novelist is really difficult for me to use because the appeal factors don't either. I've never dialed them in or they just don't quite work for me.
Yeah, me too. I get that.
So, but a lot of people read in a different way, but I mean, learning about that stuff is truly fascinating because you can help so many people with dialing that in. It's really an art. It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and I just like, the more I know about myself, the better I understand myself. So like Myers-Briggs, that was such a life-changing thing for me to figure out, and how I relate to the world and other people, and like what works for me and what doesn't work for me. Why I'm like, ooh, for some people, and like very few people, but like bring them closer. And book-wise, it's always been like a kind of a scattershot of what I do like. My guilty reading pleasure, though, is trashy action movies as a book, which is the Jack Reacher series.
Well, see, I've heard those are great.
Audiobooks up.
I've heard those are fantastic. I've not read those. The Lee Child, is that like, I've not read those. I've heard those are truly outstanding, and I have not read them.
I truly enjoy them.
That's kind of what Michael Connolly is for me, or I'm trying to think of another person that I read like him. That it's there's something just smart enough to like in the way that he writes, or interesting enough to be in the way that he writes that it pulls me in.
Yeah. There's always character development happening too. Like, I wanted to be one of those people who really liked YA trilogies, was a thing for a while. But I would always be so frustrated by the third book because there's like monumental character development that happens in the first book, medium amount of character development in the second book, but there is like zero character development in the third book. And that's pretty important to me, character and plot. But I don't pay attention to detail when I'm reading. Like I thought Dumbledore was a woman until I saw the first movie. And I was like, what is this patriarchy happening in Harry Potter? I skipped over the beard, like all of these, he said, Dumbledore was a woman in my world.
Well, hey, you need to, that could be a new remake of It's Time to Refire Up the Harry Potter.
It's one of those few books that I can't actually read again. I've gotten there. I reread it every year for many years, and I'm kind of good.
I've never read any of them. Aaron is a huge fan. I never. Oh, I do like Don Winslow and Dennis Lehane. Yes. And
comments.
I've heard of Joe Ide, but I haven't read him, and I don't know Thomas Perry. I'll have to check those out.
I don't need to watch Batterers, so I'm going to skip Tiger King. I have enough narcissists in my world investigating sexual and domestic violence on a daily basis.
Yeah, it was fascinating with the first two episodes, and then it kind of, I don't know. The thing that I think that Aaron and I liked about it the most is we were like, wait, what? And then it kind of, for me, it went a little bit off the rail, but this guy, I don't know, is bizarre.
I have to admit, like, my day job is not fun time petting zoo by any means. And so I understand why people are into true crime. I understand why they're into NYPD Blue or whatever that looks like these days. I get paid to deal with stuff like that on a daily basis. It's not an escape for me. That's like working.
Oh, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think we're all, like, the context of our lives is so crucial, right? You know, like you work in a emergency room and everybody that drives a motorcycle dies, you know, because that's the only part of motorcycle riding that you see. You don't see somebody not dying and enjoying riding their motorcycle. Like, it's the dumbest thing one could ever do, because you see people that don't have skin who are riding motorcycles. So like there's, yeah, the frame can really create a lot of context for your
Yeah.
life. I could see
Like,
you not needing any more of that.
yeah, I
When
live
you're
in
trying
the
to relax.
fantasy realm. I watch a lot of Doctor Who or Supernatural, or, you know, I was into Buffy. Like, that can never happen. And if it does, I'm prepared. But most likely it's not going to happen. I can live in that world. Actually, I rewatch stuff like that a lot when I'm knitting or sewing or, you know, whatever. It's like candy. It's like the Harry Potter series. It's like candy. So is Jack Reacher. When you just need a little snack.
Yes. No, I'm trying to think. That's, yeah, my snack, I guess, has been it at this point. So we'll see.
You ready for that ending? My
Oh,
mind was blown as a middle schooler. I was like, does nobody know about this? Like, why are they letting kids read this? This is crazy.
yes. Yes. We'll see. I really struggle to finish very long books right now, so we'll see. But he is so readable and it goes so fast. I feel like I might have a chance that I might make it.
My favorite Stephen King was the first time travel thing I ever read was Langoliers. Um,
Mm.
it really blew my mind when I was in middle school. It was such a good book, and I reread that to my oldest first before we dug into the Gunslinger series.
Oh, I've realized I need to read more because I honestly have not read much of him. Like I read Christine and Misery and Eyes of the Dragon when I was a kid. I loved that book. Um,
I never.
and it was like that first really early fantasy book that he wrote. It's one of the first books I bought like in hardcover, I remember. Um, when I was a kid, I don't know if anybody else did this. When I was a kid, I thought, you know, you were supposed to like take the dust jackets off, that was like what you just bought, that it came and you're supposed to take it off and like have the actual spines of the books all on your, so I'd have my books and I'd have to figure out somewhere to store all these dust jackets. And then I realized, no, because you're not, you know, I think books just must not used to have book jackets a long time ago. I don't know, but they were just supposed to have these spines. And so I'm like, what am I gonna do with all these dust jackets? And I realized, oh shit, you're supposed to keep them on. Like, my parents don't read. I don't know, you know. So
Totally.
Oh, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. Um, anyway, um,
We got a question. The zombie apocalypse is coming. Are you here for it or not? What makes you stay or bow out?
oh, how do you go
Bow out?
first?
Do you mean like letting a zombie eat you? I'm wondering. That was Katie's question. Or, yep. Okay. Letting zombies eat you or not letting zombies eat you. I would like to think that I'm a super badass and would totally be an essential member of a zombie apocalypse team. The reality of that is probably not so much, but I hope that people are realizing now that you need the knitters and the sewers on your zombie apocalypse team, and you need to protect them, or you're going to be real cold come December, when there's a zombie apocalypse.
No, you know, Aaron and I used to talk about this when we'd watch Walking Dead. You know, is I have no, like, all of my, if I have skills, which I'm still not certain that I necessarily would say that I do, they're very abstract. And so we're like, you know, what do you do when you have these skill sets that we have? Are you like the negotiator for the team? Like, you have to, when you can't do anything, she could at least knit. You have to figure out uh, how you put yourself in the position to be necessary when you're not strong. You don't know how to kill stuff. You don't know how to cook things. And so you have to find, there's not a lot of roles for negotiating compromise type people. but you might need them when you're like talking to the other tribe of people or something. I don't know. So trying to figure out how you leverage leadership skills in the zombie or supposed leadership skills, because
Healthy
it's basically
delegation.
just kind of like a dodge. Like you're just trying to convince people to not eat you at that point. I don't think I'd make it very long.
Save me.
Yeah, I have to like just get by on my wits. Be the court jester, possibly. I don't know.
Brad,
Yeah, I'm afraid of the zombie apocalypse. I don't want it to happen.
As long as they're slow zombies, it's fine.
We'll say if you just reminded me, Katie, like a great short story. This guy, Jess Walter. I don't know if folks have heard of him. He's a really great author out of Spokane. He wrote Beautiful Ruins is kind of what he's most well known for. But he wrote this collection of short stories, and I saw him read this story at an event in Seattle before the book came out. I can't remember what the short story book is called now, but it's called Don't Eat Cat, I think. And it's in this world where zombies live in the world and they work in the world and kind of live among us. And like it kind of opens a Starbucks while this guy's trying to order a cup of coffee from the zombie who can't understand him. And then the zombie accidentally bites somebody. And then, the guy gets really angry that they let these zombies work here. And it's kind of like a civil rights issue that you can't discriminate against the zombies because they're stupid and don't have brains. And so and then it goes this really dark, very dark place by the end of it, but it's a fantastic kind of tragicomic zombie short story that I highly recommend called Don't Eat Cat.
You have a lot of zombie recommendations. I love it.
That one is truly weird. It was great to hear him read it. I can't remember what that was. Some like a poetry and short story reading. It was really a lot of fun at the Hugo House in Seattle.
Cool. So you've gotten a lot of really good book recommendations. It looks like in this chat list. You should save it.
And I think we will. Kristen is in charge of all things technical. So I think she's recording things. I think it keeps the chat when we keep it.
Nice. Well, if anybody has any recommendations for me, I will be happy to hear them as well. But we have successfully chatted with Brad for an hour and 17 minutes. I'm very impressed that it wasn't awkward. It was fun. And you did a great job as host. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being on this show. It may be a show of one episode, or maybe there will be more. Who knows? But thanks for being game to do this. It's really been a lot of fun to just get to sit and chat. Like I said at the beginning of this, one of the only times I really ever get to just sit and chat with somebody for a long extended period of time is in a formal interview. So it's kind of funny and ironic, like the closest that you ever get to be to people sometimes is interviewing them on a stage. It's really weird. But kind of true. So thank you.
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, I'm glad you had fun. I had a blast. And thanks for being our guinea pig. This was great.
Hey, always happy to serve as a guinea pig.
Well, I guess this is the end of our show. So we'll say goodbye. Brian, Katie, other folks that joined us, Tom, Andrew, I saw, Michelle, thanks everybody. We'll have this online somewhere. And thanks for coming.
Yeah,
goodbye.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, have a good night, and I'll bye, Katie. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, good to see you, Katie.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I'll get this uploaded tomorrow.
All right.
So I think it went well. Did you like it? I kind of liked the, kind of smaller crowd. I didn't know if I should unmute people or not. Like, I don't know. Like, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I thought it went well.
Yeah.
I think with something that small, we could possibly let people unmute and ask questions. Yeah, we could try that.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll get it up and loaded tomorrow. So
all right.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
I thought it was really well. So thanks.
Good. All right. You bet. Thanks for the encouragement.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
It was
all right. Bye-bye.